Hi, good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Wendy with PAI, co-chair of ANA. Thanks for joining our webinar today on advocacy for generics. This is an issue that many of us have been discussing over the years inside conversations, usually at RHSC meetings. But it's picked up a little bit more, and we wanted to have colleagues from the GEMS Caucus as well as members of ANA talk a bit more about advocacy opportunities. Some of you will remember that Lester, who's a panelist today, joined an ANA call earlier this year to give us more background. With that, why don't we get started? Our program begins with Lester. He is going to give us a background on the issues that generic manufacturers face. He is with the Concept Foundation, Director of Operations, and Chair of the GEMS Caucus. Lester, over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Give me a second and I'll get my slides on view to you all. Are the slides visible to everybody?
Yes.
Perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm speaking to you today in my capacity as chair of the Generic Manufacturers Caucus. Just a very brief, little bit of background on the GEMS. I mean, the GEMS is a group of generic manufacturers of reproductive health medicines who came together several years ago around a common interest in improving the quality of their products and promoting those products as a contribution to the prevailing global issues at the time, both in terms of FP 2020, the idea of providing more choice of products, more competition, better pricing, and of course high quality. Likewise, many of the same and different manufacturers bringing forward quality products evidenced by WHO pre-qualification in the sphere of maternal health, at the time under the auspices of the work going on under the UN Commission for Life-Saving Commodities. So, you know, over the years, the pre-qualified product pipeline within reproductive health has increasingly looked a lot healthier than it did sort of 5-10 years ago, and there are now pre-qualified products or products close to pre-qualification for most reproductive health medicines, and indeed many more in the pipeline. One of the issues that the generics have faced and continue to face is around, despite significant investments in terms of support from donors as well as significant investments by the companies themselves, the companies are increasingly concerned that they're not seeing a return in terms of product sales as a result of the investments they have made in quality. And this has been identified by the GEMS group as the #1 issue for them going forward. As I said before, companies have invested literally millions of dollars in terms of each company for each product. Donors have supported with matching investments and technical support over the last 5 to 10 years. We now have a fee structure in place, which means that in order to maintain WHO pre-qualification, manufacturers are having to pay $20,000 to $25,000 per product to keep their pre-qualified status. And of course, those investments were made because they responded to a call, or they felt that they responded to a call that their products were needed, that procurers both at international and country level were interested in quality assured products, were interested in better pricing, and preferred to have a choice of medicines from which to choose from when making procurement decisions. So As a quick overview to frame the discussion, manufacturers that now have pre-qualified products are not seeing the expected return on the quality investments they've made. And in broad terms, procurement practices are at two extremes. In other words, there are two very distinct and specific issues that need to be overcome. The manufacturers feel that despite their pre-qualified status, and in some cases, some manufacturers have had pre-qualified status for a number of years, and some of those manufacturers have their products registered in a broad range of program countries, that at the international level they are not seeing the traction that they expected in terms of international public procurers, USAID, UNFPA, social marketeers and others, shifting their purchasing approaches towards quality generics in the way that was expected and that was, in the opinion of manufacturers, considered necessary in order for them to justify their investments to owners and top management. So at the international level, it is the fact that currently most family planning purchasing is still primarily restricted to 3 or 4 historical innovator companies. We can talk a little bit about that in a moment. And at the country level, there indeed is a lot of generic purchasing going on, and in fact generic purchasing is increasing, but in the absence of tenders and country procurements following the same internationally accepted quality criteria in terms of guiding principles as is applied at the international level, the products that are being procured in terms of generics are those that are not evidently quality assured, evidenced by pre-qualification or something similar, but are procurements that are driven primarily and almost solely based upon price with limited focus on quality assurance. So in summary terms, the members of the GEMS who have made the investments and have their products available for purchase at competitive pricing are not getting orders at the international level, which is still primarily going towards the historical innovators, and at the country level, primarily because of less awareness around quality assurance issues, they are not getting traction in terms of purchasing that is done directly at the country level, who are indeed purchasing from generics, but from generics who are not evidently quality assured, because these offer a price advantage over quality assured generics. And then a common theme amongst both generics and innovators actually is not being able to plan adequately for the future in terms of what is going to happen in terms of volumes and what products are going to be required, with some opportunity to plan. Just as an example at the international level, or a couple of examples actually, hormonal contraceptive public sector procurement and supply for low and middle income countries is still primarily driven by the two major agencies, UNFPA and USAID. And as an example, and I'll add a disclaimer in just a second in terms of these numbers, in 2015, as in the 6 years prior to that, 99% of the value of all hormonal products supplied were sourced from 3 innovator companies. A number that remains consistent up until, also includes 2016, and will probably look not dissimilar in 2017. So you now have a whole bunch of generic manufacturers manufacturing pills and injectables and implants, but in terms of procurement from the two major agencies, it's business as usual. Things are changing at the international level. I mean, UNFPA are making efforts to, I wouldn't say direct efforts to absolutely buy generic, but certainly opening up their procurement mechanisms and trying to downstream, orientate their country offices towards generics. But from a generic perspective, time is of the essence. Some of these companies have had products pre-qualified for 4 or 5 years now, and as of 2016, I'm not seeing significant business from either UNFPA or USAID. Directly opposed to that is what is happening at country level. So, manufacturers are aware that the world doesn't 100% revolve around securing purchases by USAID and UNFPA. There is a lot of purchasing done via tenders and other mechanisms by countries themselves. However, many low and middle income markets are still purchasing and within their marketplaces have sizable volumes of non-quality assured products via standard international definitions. It doesn't necessarily mean the products are not are bad. It means that they are not evidently quality assured by a specific standard. And the reason why most LMICs still have a significant number of non-quality assured products is that they are being purchased directly by governments, whereby price is king, and still in some cases, supplied through international tenders and social marketing operations at the international level. So, in 2015, 40 million injectables were supplied at the international level from manufacturing sources that are not demonstrably quality assured. So just to finish off and frame the discussion and perhaps get people thinking, there is another clear distinction that needs to be made, and that is the supply chains in place in terms of family planning products versus maternal health products, which are completely different to one another. So, many of the GEMS manufacturers manufacture both maternal health drugs, oxytocin, misoprostol, etc., as well as manufacturing family planning products. For family planning products, 50–60% of all products supplied to low and middle income countries are supplied through international agencies of some description, and therefore that is the reason why there is a focus on those international agencies when it comes to family planning products. The challenge is even greater when we talk about maternal health drugs, because by and large there is not substantive volume purchasing of misoprostol or oxytocin or drugs for safe medical abortion being done at the international level. Indeed, some social marketing organisations handle misoprostol and mifepristone, but in terms of the overall quantities and volumes of the products that are being supplied to the market, these are relatively insignificant. And this is because the maternal health drugs, and this is where the advocacy challenge becomes even more significant, if you like. Misoprostol, oxytocin, they are not going through international agencies. They are going through a broad variety of mechanisms which eventually find their way into public sector clinics, and this can range from, in some cases, governments purchasing themselves through local agents or other procurement mechanisms. More often than not, it will be a very complex network of international wholesalers leading to national distributors, reaching all the way back to individual manufacturers in a broad range of countries. So specifically for misoprostol and oxytocin, the challenge of outlining the importance of quality assurance and ensuring that future pipelines and supply chains for misoprostol and oxytocin are stocked with quality assured products, especially given the usage of these two drugs and the implications of poor quality for both misoprostol and oxytocin, is perhaps and arguably even a greater challenge for advocates than it is for family planning products. So I'll quickly skim through the last few slides and then I'll stop. Just to give you a little bit more broad-based background on the GEMS, it was launched in 2013. It's a group of manufacturers committed to providing more women with affordable, safe and effective contraceptives and RH medicines. In terms of WHO pre-qualification, there are 26 generic finished products currently pre-qualified, 14 of those from GEM members, and 8 active pharmaceutical ingredients, plus an additional 2 finished pharmaceutical products on the approved ERP list, and also a further pipeline of products that are currently under review. The GEMS themselves currently cover around 60 low and middle income countries, and since 2013 have shipped almost 6 million in maternal health medicines and 594 million in contraceptives, and you can see the breakdown of the different contraceptive methods below. So the goals of the GEMS right now is to continue to meet and maintain the quality standards that they've achieved, to ensure that there is demand for their products going forward, and ensure that they are able to access markets both at the international level and at the national levels to ensure a sustainable supply of quality assured, affordable reproductive health medicines. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Lester. I neglected to mention at the beginning of this, everyone, that if you have any questions or comments for Lester, for Sarah, for folks on the webinar, there are 2 ways to do that. There is a chat box feature on the right hand of your screen. Feel free to insert comments, questions there, and they'll queue up. There is also an option to raise your hand electronically. Emily and Ina will see those and queue those up as well. So shifting now over to Sarah, former co-chair of ANA, the head of advocacy for Marie Stopes International. She's done a lot of thinking on these issues, and she's going to address how advocacy can support generics and where the opportunities might lie here. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you, Lester. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So before I start, a bit of background about why Marie Stopes is so interested in generics. We're hugely interested in generic commodities because we see the potential for making our money go further, which means we can reach more women. We've done a huge amount of work with the Concept Foundation around helping get generic medical abortion products through the WHO pre-qualification process. And when I was researching this presentation, I sort of realised that although we've done a lot of work around getting generic products to through the pre-qualification process, we haven't actually done a huge amount of advocacy around generics. And I think that that's because in the past we've always engaged within the existing framework and within the rules of the game. But I know last night when I was looking at Lester's slides and doing some research for this presentation, you know, it made me realise that actually if we're going to be really effective as advocates, we're going to have to change the rules of the game because it's not working properly at the moment. So Lester, you presented us with quite a dichotomy. We've got this tension between global quality standards, which of course are hugely important because every woman should have the right to access high quality products regardless of where she lives in the world. But we also have a scheme that's promoting quality that's ignoring the realities of the market. And then country governments are put in this difficult position where price is a huge issue, particularly when in low resource environments, but at the same time, low price should not mean low quality. And in the case of generic products, it doesn't. So I thought for this presentation I'd just go through a few of the potential advocacy opportunities, starting at the global level with the WHO pre-qualification programme, then looking at the procurement process, and then looking at issues at opportunities at the country level. So I think globally, you know, Lester, as you said, the main target really is the WHO pre-qualification programme. And I also realised how little how little I know about this programme, which I think, you know, is potentially a challenge for advocates to overcome. I mean, broadly, this is the WHO programme whereby products go through this to get pre-qualification, which means that they're high quality products, which means that bilateral and multilateral donors are then able to procure these products. Quite a lot of donors will only procure products that have gone through either the WHO pre-qualification or the stringent regulatory, or an equivalent stringent regulatory authority. So that would be the US Food and Drugs Administration or the European Medicines Board. We've learned that it's a long process getting through the WHO pre-qualification. You know, lever plants, I mean, when did that process start? Say, well, prior to 2010, and we're now in 2017, it's just got its ERP status, which means it hasn't finished the process yet, but it's very near to the end. I also did a bit of research to see, you know, how many family planning products actually get through the process. And since the beginning of, so since the 1st of January in 2016, 7 family planning products were pre-qualified, but 14 ARVs were pre-qualified. Over the years, you know, that gap has got smaller, but clearly, to me, that indicates that there's potentially a political will issue if, you know, double the numbers of one reproductive health product being pre-qualified that over family planning products. You know, there's similar-ish volumes in the pipeline, but more seem to be getting through faster. But looking at this WHO pre-qualification programme, I mean, if we start to unpack the process a bit and look at where the potential entry points for advocates are, so the first stage is invitation for a product to go through the PQ process. It has to be invited through an expression of intent. There's 3 criteria for this. One is the product's listed on the WHO model list of essential medicines, or an application to the model list has been submitted to the relevant expert committee and is likely to meet the criteria for inclusion. And then the third is that the product is recommended for use by a current treatment guideline. I think the expert committees require more unpacking. We need to find out who's on these expert committees. Are they WHO technical experts, or do they have representation from member states as well? How can we access these individuals? How can we influence them? The manufacturers then submit a dossier around the status and formulation and so on of the product. I think this is an area where we could probably collaborate a lot more closely with the GEMS, is you know, where we share information about products that are coming up through the pipeline. The third state part of the process is the inspection. And for us, the big question is who is in the inspection teams. Again, these are made up of experts from a range of different countries, but it's not clear as to which countries are represented, how these experts are selected. So again, that's another entry point for advocates to start potentially mapping out who the decision makers are and seeing how we can access them. And then the final stage is the decision. And hopefully the decision is favourable and the product does get its PQ status. So the next stage is how is the product brought to market, and what are the advocacy intervention points around bringing a product to market in a country to ensure that that it's being procured and being used. But I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit later on when we go down to the national level. So just looking at some of the, I think that by looking more closely at the WHO pre-qualification process, we do identify potential entry points for advocates, but I think we also uncover some potential challenges. I'm not speaking on behalf of the ANA group, but myself personally as an advocate, I realise how little I know about this process and how, although the same advocacy techniques and approaches apply, but how this is so different to the usual advocacy that I do with governments, and how I've actually got a whole bunch of landscaping and background to learn about to be a truly effective advocate in this space. So, as I said, I think there's definitely a political will issue at WHO. Why is it the family planning products are just not being prioritised? There's definitely opportunities for increased collaboration with GEMS. I feel that we do have huge knowledge gaps, but the GEMS Caucus could help us fill some of those. And I just wanted to highlight at this point, the case of Levonna plants as well, which was being marketed, which was, you may well know as Sino implant from Dow Pharmaceutical. And it's just been given its ERP status, which is wonderful news, and it now means that WHO is able to, that UNFPA is able to procure the products and is doing so, which is fantastic news. But something strange happened in the process that I don't really know what happened. It's been approved for 3 years, which is great, but everybody was hoping that it would be approved for 4 years. And the reason why we all wanted it to be approved for 4 years is because there isn't a 4-year implant on the market. And we were very optimistic that it would get 4 years use approval, because there was a research study to prove that it did work for 4 years. The research methodology was approved by WHO, but then when it came to the final approval process, WHO decided that the research methodology that it had approved wasn't valid, so they've only approved it for 3 years. There will be an opportunity to review that, because, like I say, it's at the ERP stage, so it's still got to go through the final process. And that final review, that will be an opportunity to revisit that, and hopefully it will get the 4 years, use approval. But clearly something has something a little bit strange has happened in the process, but we don't know what, because there's a lack of transparency around who's making the decisions in this process. So moving on now to UNFPA, and definitely, as Lester said, UNFPA has made progress in this area. Thanks in part to efforts of some members of the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition, the generic names have now been taken off the ordering database and order forms and so on for UNFPA supplies, which means that those filling out the forms aren't guided towards innovator products, that was a great victory. But we've definitely seen an increase. From 2014 to 2015, there was a significant increase of generic procurement from 145 million to over 800 million. But in 2016, I haven't got a full year's data, but it looks as though by the end of the year the numbers might have been slightly below that in 2015. So why is that? Where does the resistance lie? I think there's definitely change at headquarters, but there's still a huge amount of advocacy needs to be done at country level. Something that colleagues in our medical team flagged to me was, and this could be a quick win, on the UNFPA supplies costings tool, all the prices, recognising that different products have different prices depending on who the supplier is. But instead of putting a range of prices or saying, that the price could be upwards of, they always put the highest priced products, they always put the highest price, which means when countries are using this tool to budget, they're budgeting on the assumption that they will be buying the most expensive product on the market and possibly not the cheapest product on the market, which is what we would want them to be procuring, because the funding, it will make their money go further. So now moving on to, why is it not moving? Moving on to the national level. So the national level, really, I think the targets fall into two categories. So the first is the government. So it's really decided, finding out in the Ministry of Health who procures the products. I've had informal feedback from some of our country programmes that in the national quantification process, when the Ministry of Health and UNFPA and providers are all sitting around a table discussing, how many products they need, of what sort of product, what type of product, when they need it, and so on. That's generally quite a transparent conversation. But as soon as it gets to the point of, okay then, so we need this many implants, what sort of implants are we going to order? Or what sort of injectables are we going to order? Some of our programmes have informed us that, at that point they've been told to leave the room. And the meeting then goes on behind closed doors. So, that's potentially a great advocacy opportunity to champion generics, but it sounds as though the NGOs and the providers and the ones that probably would be championing them aren't always included in those conversations. So again, we're going back to that transparency issue. There's a complete lack of transparency around this. But that's not to say that there aren't other platforms that we can use. We do have access through the family planning technical working groups and national equivalents, through the reproductive health commodity security technical working groups. A lot of civil society does have a membership of those groups, and there's an opportunity to start identifying potential champions for generics and start working with them. So they are taking generics to those behind the doors conversations. The Ministry of Finance, one thing that we could do would be, if we could get hold of the different costings, is to start produce costings of products and saying, well, if you buy this, if you need this many implants and you're going to buy all injectables and you're going to buy them from an innovator, it's going to cost your national budget this much, but you could save X amount by procuring a generic product. Likewise, working with the National Pharmaceuticals Board, these are pretty key to ensuring that products are registered and that products are on procurement lists. So when a new product comes to market, to ensure that it is used and to ensure that it survives, there's a huge amount of advocacy that can be done at country level around ensuring that it's on procurement lists, ensuring that those that are actually using procurement lists to do the procurement know what this product is, know why it's so important. And then the second advocacy target at country level really are the providers themselves. One thing that we do hear about is that there is provider bias towards generic products. So potentially we need to do a huge amount of work with providers at country level to in dispel any myths that they have around around generic products. And then finally, the professional associations, they can be a really effective way of getting those to providers, and particularly through health worker trainings and certification processes and so on. Are training courses including a section around generic products and why they're so important and why they should be prioritised in procurement. So we've just had a quick run through of some potential advocacy opportunities, but I do feel that we also have a few issues that we do need to, elephants in the room that we can't really avoid if we are going to become effective advocates in this space. The first is transparency. It feels like there's a huge gap of information around who's making the decisions, when decisions are being made, and so on. I think the second piece is we've got a huge amount to learn from the HIV movement. I haven't talked about the work that the HIV movement did around getting generic ARVs to market, because that's a massive topic, and I think that is worthy of a webinar in its own right, and maybe it's something we could think about doing in the future. But there's definitely a huge amount of lessons that we could learn from the activists in that sector. And particularly around how to engage with these new advocacy targets that are probably a little bit out of our comfort zone. So I know that some of them are certainly out of my comfort zone. You know, the World Trade Organization, TRIPS, you know, how do we engage with those? So we're using trading mechanisms to help increase access to products. A third thing is, I think one of the reasons possibly why as a sector, and I think particularly Mary Stopes, I'm not speaking on behalf of the sector, but speaking on behalf of Mary Stopes, one of the reasons why we've maybe not been as vocal as we possibly could have been in this area in the past is because we're service providers. You know, a lot of the activists in the family planning movement are also service providers, and it's quite hard when you're a service provider. You've always got one eye on not rock on. You want to rock the boat, but you don't want to rock it so much that it will jeopardise your access to commodities and therefore your ability to provide services. So I think, you know, maybe by partnering with more of the pure advocacy groups, and particularly those that have good track records in governance and access to essential medicines issues, they can say the things that we can't. And I think we could also learn a huge amount from that sector. And finally, increased collaboration and information sharing with GEMS. You know, just knowing what products were in the pipeline, and that the challenges that specific manufacturers were experiencing in relation to specific products. I think having that really specific, focused information would help us find our way in this area, and maybe do more targeted and direct advocacy than we've currently been doing. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, that was a lot of information. I want to throw it open to the group. We have about 15 minutes left. If you have any comments, points of clarification, questions, ideas, suggestions, let's get them out there.
Wendy, we already have one clarification from Kate Rademacher about the Sino implant that she wanted to make, and I wanted to give her the floor, but apparently she's not connected to audio, so I'll explain what she wrote. So the clinical trial is ongoing, and Levoplan is currently labeled for 3 years of use. Should the ongoing clinical trial support 4 years of use, these data will be submitted to WHO in the second half of 2017 for consideration. And she also mentions that there's more information to be found on that on the FHI 360 website. If there's anyone else that has a question, you can raise your hand. It's like this little hand in the left upper corner, and then I can give you the floor so you can ask your question yourself if you prefer that, or put it in the chat box as you want. I think we have Vibhu Garg who's want to ask a question, so I'll... Okay. Hi Vibhu, the floor is yours.
Hello everybody, this is Vibhu, and I'm hearing in on behalf of the intergovernmental organization called Partners in Population and Development, PPD. Does everybody know about it, or nobody knows about it, or?
Oh, we do.
Ah, okay. There is, I just wanted to bring to the attention that there is 22nd and 23rd at the WHO, the PCC committee meeting of the HRP, Human research, the human reproduction team, the RHR that was known as, and would it be one of the forums, and I'll be attending it as an observer, but last year as well I made a statement, and I think it was something related around the advocacy part that the speakers have spoken, and I just I think that could be one of the platforms, because this is inside WHO, and being an ex-WHO, I realize some of the issues that have actually come up related to transparency or the WHO PQ program. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. And also the convening power of PPD with 26 member countries from the Global South. And many discussions happening around, commodities and technology transfer. So that is a huge platform too. Yeah, I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Does any one of the speakers want to respond to that?
I can respond quickly. So thank you, Bibo. So does that mean that PPD will be attending the PCC meeting?
Yes.
And you'll have the opportunity to make a statement?
Yes.
So maybe something that the GEMS and the ANA working group would want to consider will be maybe inputting into a joint statement that PPD could make about this.
I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, then,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go on, Emily.
I wanted to go to the next question, so if you have something more to add. Okay, our next question is from Sarah Rich. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thanks. So just a quick thanks to everyone who was involved in planning this webinar. I thought it was super interesting and a really important issue to take to the Advocacy and Accountability Working Group. I just had a few comments about how we're framing the advocacy targets. So at the international level, I agree that UNFPA and USAID can be advocacy targets to purchase quality assured generic products and to make sure that they are sort of on the table for countries and other agencies that are purchasing the products. But we also need to remember that there's work to be done in promoting those products at the consumer level to build confidence in those products and brand recognition and all of the things that go into how consumers choose what products they're going to use. And then secondly, for national level advocacy, I actually think this is a great space for the Advocacy and Accountability Working Group members to get involved, because quality of products is really still regulated at the national level as opposed to so much else that's going on in our world that's happening at the subnational level, and therefore requires so many sort of simultaneous strategies to affect broad change. So at the national level, I think that there's a lot of space to ensure that governments are procuring quality assured generics, as has been mentioned, but also to work with the pharmaceutical regulatory boards like the federal, like the FDA in the US, to better regulate the products that are on the private market, because so many of the countries in which we're working have huge private markets, and quality is a problem in those private markets as well. So I think that was a lot to put into one comment, but I really think there's a lot of potential here.
Thanks, Sarah. Definitely agree. I think for ANA, we have the two work streams, one on financing and one on last mile. I think something to take back to the ANA is there a subset of advocates that are keen to work on this issue? And if so, I think we need to join forces to explore this further with GEMS and see what we can do collectively. Emily, are there any other comments or questions?
Yes, we have one more question from Elizabeth Wesley. Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Hi, I actually typed my question in, and I think it was similar to Sarah's question, or almost probably the same. you know, I really appreciated Lester and Sarah's presentations. I think they're very interesting. I'm coming from the perspective of the market development approaches working group. And so what I saw sort of right from the beginning of the framing is that this framing of this generics issue doesn't really address the total market. And we know that a lot of family planning and even maternal health products are purchased directly by consumers. So just to echo what Sarah said, an advocacy target could be really the local regulatory agencies or the country level regulatory agencies that are in charge of approving products to come into the country's private commercial sector. And to add to that, you know, direct advocacy and sort of education of consumers around trusting quality assured generics. And I think there's a low level of trust in commercial products right now in general, because there's been a lot of media coverage of counterfeit products or poor quality products. And so I think it's a bigger issue than just WHO pre-Q or sort of what the donors are buying. I think there's an issue in a lot of countries around sort of trust of the regulatory authority and trust of sort of what you see on the shelf in drugstores. So very similar to what Sarah Rich already said. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth.
Does anyone of the speakers want to respond, or shall we go to the next question?
Could I respond, Lester?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, it's a great comment, Elizabeth. In fact, it's a very timely comment. I was discussing at length yesterday with one of the large international agencies around how we are beginning to see trends in approaches at country level, even down to the level of regulatory, depending upon whether it relates to a publicly procured product by the government or whether it's a product on the private sector. So the observation was that there are many countries now that are asking, in terms of registering a product, for similar requirements to those that are within the pre-qualification program. However, in those same countries, we have also observed that the products that are going to go through private sector channels, like misoprostol, like emergency contraception, that the regulatory agencies in some cases seem to be applying different criteria in terms of the requirements for products that are not going to be purchased by their national government but are going to go into their commercial marketplace. The observation was that the requirements are somewhat less. So I think you're onto something there, and it's certainly something that is new for me and something that will start to feed into the dynamics as we think through this.
Thanks, Lester. And then we have another question from Alan Thompson. Alan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so this is Alan Thompson. I'm with the Global Health Supply Chain Program Procurement Supply Management Project, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're working on with USAID around procuring more generics, because it wasn't, I know we haven't gotten this information out in the same way that UNFPA's work has become more public. So, you know, we have over the past year been very interested in expanding our supplier base to include more generics, and I can say, and of course we have our own quality limitations about what generics we're able to procure, but for example, right now we issued an RFP for oral contraceptives, and we're anticipating awarding you know, to several generic manufacturers, and so this would be the first time that USAID would buy oral contraceptives from generic manufacturers. So we're very excited. This is upcoming. It hasn't been completed yet, but this is you know, one example of what we're hoping over the next year or so will be an expansion of our supplier base in several of the products that family planning products that we procure. So so USAID is also sort of on board and working closely with the UNFPA on this generics issue.
Thanks, Ellen. There's a lot of overlap among the implementing mechanisms here of the RHSC. I think we need to discuss this more, perhaps, you know, in the coming months leading up to Dakar. I definitely sense that there is interest, willingness to continue this and try to strategize further. It could be a subset of ANA and GEMS members, as well as folks from MDA and system strengthening. Also thinking about Maternal Health Supplies Caucus. I really hear your point on that, Lester. And then, of course, there's now a safe abortion work stream within the NERT Caucus, where we could maybe address some of the quality generics there. There's a lot, but I think we need to figure out a plan and a way forward and get a subgroup working. I'm not sure it's a work stream within ANA, but I defer to the group on that. It might be in the very near future, if not this year. So to be continued. Are there any final thoughts, comments? We're at time. We have a couple minutes left from the speakers or from anyone else on the call. Okay. I will take that as everybody is ready to move on. Sarah, I liked your idea of maybe a webinar with colleagues from the HIV sector. Lessons learned from their work with WHO. That could be very interesting.
Yeah, I think I'd like it if that would be something we would follow up on, so I think we could potentially learn a lot of tricks and tips from those guys.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lester. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, RHSC Secretariat in Brussels, for organizing this. Very informative, and more to come. We'll keep everyone posted.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.